I'm a pretty big fan of Napoleonic history, and there are already two really great films on the era: Waterloo from 1970 and War and Peace from the 1967. So, when it was revealed that Ridley Scott, the legendary director behind films like Gladiator, was going to be making his own interpretation of Napoleon, I was excited. I was hyped, actually, you might say. So the film came out last week, and I think it's fair to say there was a pretty negative reaction online. People went to see it, and they said, this film really isn't great. It's very historically inaccurate, which is unfortunate for me as a history fan, and generally, even as a film, it doesn't work for a variety of reasons. And I took that opinion to heart, but I still said, I'm a big fan of this era, I'm going to go see this film. So yesterday I went to see the film, finally. And I have to say, boy was I wrong. I went in expecting it to be maybe 5 or 6 out of 10, not terrible, but not great. Man, I was so wrong. This film really sucked. This film was genuine garbage. And it's such a shame because for the first 5 minutes of the film, with the battle scene at Toulon, I thought that was really good. I thought that was well handled. And I was thinking, wow, the guys online were totally wrong. This film seems pretty good. And then it collapsed. It collapsed quicker than the Austrian army in 1805. This film fell apart. And so, why did this film fall apart? Why was it so bad? Well, first off, the characterization and the portrayal of Napoleon, the title character, was terrible. The entire film, he is portrayed as being the epitome of the simp. You know that meme where it's like, yes, honey? He is literally that guy.
Do I need warn you of my indiscretions?
No, madame.
Does where I have been concern you?
No, madame.
If you look down, you'll see a surprise. And once you see it, you will always want it. Do I need warn you of my indiscretions?
No, madame.
Does where I have been concern you?
No, madame. I feel sorry for you.
You want to be great? You are nothing without me. You are just a brute that is nothing without me.
The entire film is him running around after his wife who's cheating on him, sending her letters, begging her, fighting with her, crying with her, returning home from military campaigns just to be with her. Didn't happen. He does nothing but run around after her. And there are some so awkward sex scenes in this film, it's ridiculous. But anyway, that's all he does. He's obsessed with his wife, which isn't historically accurate, and it portrays him as such a pathetic character. And it's just such a badly portrayed example of Napoleon. The entire time he's obsessed with his wife, and the few scenes that we do get to have where Napoleon is not in some way thinking about his wife. So the few scenes that's, actually about the title character doing most of what he did, he is portrayed as a completely incompetent, idiotic imbecile. Every little minor moment of glory or victory that he should have had, whether it's his coronation or anything, is turned into the most pathetic, sad, incompetent thing. He is presented as being a loser idiot in every regard. And this is only made worse by Joaquin Phoenix. Now, I think Joaquin Phoenix is a great actor, but he really doesn't suit this role. He's great as mentally damaged, simp-like, sad, depressed characters, like in The Joker or as Commodus in Gladiator. He does those characters so well, it's amazing. But he did not suit this role. The entire time, and he admitted himself, apparently on one of the first days on set, he was like, well, what on earth am I supposed to do? He does not fit the role of Napoleon, aside from the obvious fact he's way too old. Napoleon was like 25 at the start of his career, and Phoenix is like 50. But he really brings a lack of any charisma, you cannot imagine this guy leading troops into battle. Napoleon charged ahead of his men at the Battle of Arcole. He was brave, charismatic, united his troops behind him, master of Europe. This guy could not even unite 20 people. The entire time he's on the verge of tears, speaking in a soft voice. And again, that's great for characters like the Joker or Commodus, but it just turns this already incompetent, simp-like portrayal of Napoleon into something that's so over the top that not only I, but many people in the cinema hall watching it were literally laughing.
Why are you staring at me?
Am I?
Yes?
I was not.
Oh, you weren't.
I was. I was staring at your face.
What is this costume you have on?
This is my uniform. I led the French victory at Toulon. Do not tell me your name.
He's portrayed as so idiotic, so over the top, so cartoonish, that it was unintentionally hilarious. The film was hilariously bad. I mean, if you approach it as a dark comedy, you might actually think it's quite good, because it is very, very funny. But of course it wasn't a dark comedy. It was presented as an entirely serious biopic of Napoleon, and it has to be viewed as entirely serious. And if you view it as serious, it is ridiculous. Clearly Ridley Scott hates Napoleon, and he wanted to lampoon him, but he went so over the top, it's just terrible. And it just damages the film, because the more you see of him, the more you just cringe. It's funny, but it's like watching... It's funny, but it's painfully funny, But that's not the end of the film's problems. Oh no. Well, first of all, the film is written. It must have been written by a 9-year-old. You have Napoleon at one point, he said to the British ambassador, "You think you're better than we are just because you have boats." Seriously, you would think a 9-year-old wrote this film. The level of dialogue is ridiculous. Some scenes are so blatantly exposition, it's painful. You don't get any real time exploring who Napoleon was, outside of his affair with Josephine. The film should have just been called Napoleon and Josephine, because that's what it's about. You'd have no idea about Napoleon the politician, Napoleon the conqueror, anything apart from Napoleon the lover. And even then, as I've mentioned before, he is portrayed in the most pathetic light possible. And the next problem I have with this film is that, look, the costumes are great. That's one of the rare good things in this film. But overall, I felt the film really did feel very, very cheap. The battle scenes in this, there were hardly any. As I said, the Siege of Toulon, that was really good. But from then on, we had the Battle of Austerlitz was so historically inaccurate, and also didn't make sense within the film, that it kind of came off a bit disappointing. And even then, it was only 4 minutes long, and it was just hardly very spectacular at all. Remember, this is a film with a budget of over $200 million. Then we had a short clip of the Battle of Borodino, which was like a 20-second highlight of some CGI troops mushing together, and some people have pointed out that that might not even have been intended to be Borodino. It was actually intended to be a scene from the Italian campaign that they just put a blue Instagram filter over to make it look Russian. And then we have at the end, we had the battle scene of Waterloo. Now, if you've ever seen the film Waterloo from 1970, perhaps the greatness of that film might taint my appreciation of this battle scene. But even without it, this battle scene felt so cheap. It looked like Napoleon maybe had 1,000 guys and Wellington had like 500. It's like, come on, you have CGI. In 1970, they could have 30,000 troops. This is 2023. You don't now. They did not have CGI back then. They had to get 30,000 real extras to film that battle scene. Nowadays you have CGI. You don't have to have hardly any extras, and your scene still looks so cheap. It was just pathetic. The entire battle scene was anticlimactic, very disappointing, and very confusing. Everything was so rushed. And that leads on to my next point. I think this film was, in a sense, doomed from the beginning. Napoleon's life is one of the most amazing and interesting in history and complex. And I just think ultimately there was no way that you could set out to have his entire life really in one film of 2.5 hours. Everything feels rushed, condensed, huge amounts of stuff cut out, to the point where it's actively just a collection of clips loosely bound together. Now that's not a film. The film basically had no plot. And aside from Napoleon and Josephine, there were really no other characters, which is such a shame because the few glimpses we do get of people like Robespierre or Talleyrand or the Tsar Alexander or anything else is like 2 minutes. They're on screen for 2 minutes. And it's so infuriating because then they cut away to have yet another scene of Napoleon and his wife crying about not having a baby or some other stupid scene like that. It's like, come on, show less of that and focus more on Napoleon's actual life outside of fake, made up drama. And that really sums this film up. It is such a disappointment. It could have been better. Definitely could have been better. Even if you take into fact that this film would have been very hard to have the whole of Napoleon's life in. Even if you did cut it down to fit 2.5 hours, it still could have been so much better. There's so many missed opportunities in this. It's actually terrible. Overall, I think this film was such a disappointing mess. Its portrayal of Napoleon as an extreme simp on the verge of tears, obsessed with his wife, is not only massively historically inaccurate, it's so over the top and cartoonish, it actively detracts from the film. That, combined with the fact the actor chosen to play him was way too old for the role, and generally not the right sort of actor to play Napoleon, combined with the fact the battle scenes feel cheap and anticlimactic, combined with the fact there's no plot or any characters really apart from Napoleon and Josephine. There are no other characters who are explored in any way, which is a real shame. Pretty much we don't get to meet Marshal Ney, we hardly get to meet Talleyrand or anyone really. And combined with the fact it was written by a 9-year-old, the CGI was unimpressive, and the whole film as a whole just really sucked. I give it a 3 out of 10. And I think that, apparently there's a Steven Spielberg miniseries maybe in the works. So I'd say if you're interested in watching something on Napoleon, watch Waterloo, watch War and Peace, wait for the Spielberg miniseries, but avoid this like the plague, because this film sucks.